On the wedding day, Ethan was a full hour late. In the end, he rushed into the wedding scene holding hands with his first love, Maya. Each of them held up a small red book high in the air. They embraced affectionately in front of me, expressing their love. Ethan walked up to me, his voice impatient, "Take off the ring." Seeing that I didn't react, he reached out and pulled it off. They exchanged rings and raised their wine glasses high. I went from being the bride to a bridesmaid. Ethan pointed towards our family's guests and disdainfully said to me, "I think this disabled person is quite suitable, you should marry him." Gabriel, the famous disabled tycoon in the capital, surprisingly stood up from his wheelchair. "Will you marry me?" "Yes." Seeing that I really got married, Ethan regretted it. He wanted me to divorce now, saying that when his feelings with Maya faded, I would still have a chance. I smiled. "It's too late, the child is already a month old." At the wedding scene, I stood alone on the stage, watching the wedding photos scrolling on the big screen, and slowly put on the wedding ring by myself. Ethan seemed to have disappeared, no one could contact him. The guests in the hall put down their chopsticks and stared at me. This hour of Ethan's delay felt like torture to me. I walked up to Ethan's mother. "Auntie, have you been able to contact Ethan?" She shook her curly head and hid her phone behind her back. While saying angry words and blaming Ethan for being unreliable, her mouth was smiling exceptionally brightly. "Lara, maybe we should just cancel the wedding and treat it as you inviting everyone to a meal, otherwise, we can't just wait bitterly for Ethan to come." She said this with a smile, holding my hand as if she was thinking for me. Meanwhile, my parents were going from table to table to explain for me. My usually taciturn father had large beads of sweat on his face, pushing his old glasses, explaining to his colleagues that I wasn't abandoned, but that the groom was too busy and would probably arrive soon. My in-laws sat there motionless, making sarcastic remarks, even with a hint of excitement. "Do you know where Ethan went?" I questioned. Ethan's mother didn't speak and just gave me a disdainful look. As I tried to get a clear answer, the venue suddenly became lively. Many people stood up and looked towards the door. A sharp female voice shouted, "The groom is here. And he's holding a woman's hand." I looked over and saw Ethan wearing the suit I had custom made for him, wearing our wedding ring, holding hands with his former unattainable first love, Maya. Their happiness was somewhat dazzling, making me almost faint. They approached me step by step, getting closer, and snatched the microphone from my hand. "Ethan. Today, I finally married the love of my life. She is Maya." He shouted loudly, raising the hand that was holding Maya's. Meanwhile, the big screen behind was still playing the behind-the-scenes footage of our wedding photo shoot. At this moment, I, wearing the wedding dress, was like a clown, caught in a dilemma. Maya cried, slowly raising two small red books. "From today, Ethan and I are legally married." At this moment, my parents looked at me, and I could clearly see the panic, unease, and bitterness in their eyes. Seeing this, my tears finally couldn't be held back. I chose the wrong person, why should my parents and I be humiliated together? As teachers, they have always been respected and have never been looked at like monsters. My father, who is weak in character, stood up abruptly, pointing at Ethan's family, so angry that he couldn't complete a sentence. My mother questioned the Fu family, "How can you be so shameless, doing such a thing to humiliate your own daughter at the wedding scene?" At this time, my prospective mother-in-law stood up, her face full of mockery. "Your daughter was originally a mistress who took Maya's place. Now, why does it seem like my son did something wrong? My son just came to his senses." She pointed at me and said to all the guests, "She was my son's secretary for a year and then climbed into his bed. I didn't want such a daughter-in-law in the first place." "Nonsense. You are not allowed to slander our Lara like this." Several relatives from my family started fighting with the Fu family, and I was stopped by Ethan. He stretched out his hand and said coldly, "The ring. Take it off." The pigeon egg-sized diamond ring on my hand was forcibly pulled off by Ethan and then put on Maya's hand. He held Maya's hand and said intimately, "It was originally custom made for you, it suits you better." I clenched my teeth, trembling with anger. That's not good. This is Lara's, I can't take it. Maya said, turning to look at me with a face full of apology. She took off the ring from her hand and handed it to me. Lara, I don't want anything else, just Ethan. I'll return the ring to you. I'm really sorry for today. Slap. Slap. As soon as Maya saw me swinging my arm, she closed her eyes and turned her head, looking like she was waiting to be hit. But after waiting for a while, my slaps landed on Ethan's face. 2 solid slaps hit Ethan's face hard, and I snatched the microphone from his hand. Seeing his stunned expression, I picked up the microphone and said to all the guests who were watching the drama, "Welcome everyone to attend the wedding ceremony of Mr. Ethan and Ms. Maya. Enjoy the food and drinks. Lobby manager, remember to refund the deposit I paid directly to my account. After the wedding ceremony, ask Mr. Ethan and Ms. Maya for the payment." Then, as I was about to leave with the bouquet, Ethan grabbed me. "Leave the things." I didn't know what he was talking about. Then I saw him give a look, and his groomsman came up and snatched the bouquet from my hand. This bouquet was custom made with my own money. Several groomsmen directly took it and gave it to Maya, calling her sister-in-law affectionately. Although Maya was crying, she smiled sweetly and thanked the groomsmen. "That's my bouquet." I walked up, and Maya quickly gave the bouquet to the female friend who came with them. The two hugged warmly, and Maya wished her to find a suitable partner soon. I stood aside like a bridesmaid. Ethan looked at me disdainfully and said, "Lara, don't blame me. You really don't deserve me. Maya and I have years of feelings that can't be forgotten just like that. So when she came to snatch the wedding, I went with her. This is our romance, which you will never understand." Seeing that I didn't speak, he smiled even more happily. "But rest assured, everyone here, I haven't ruined Lara. I haven't even touched her, she's a top-quality second-hand good. If anyone wants her, hurry up. I know why he humiliated me like this, it's just because I refused his intimate requests time and time again, which frustrated him each time. But I just wanted to save the best for the wedding night. Now, it can be considered a blessing in disguise, I got to know what kind of person he is, and I didn't lose anything myself. Lara, hurry up and choose. The people here today are all big shots in the capital. Although some are a bit older, you can definitely handle them." He smiled with an unclear meaning and then randomly pointed at someone. "Him. I think he's good." He turned his head and saw that the person was disabled, which made him even more excited. "I think he's very suitable, you should marry him." My parents had just recovered from the intense argument with the Fu family's relatives. Seeing the person Ethan was pointing at, my mother immediately said angrily, "Ethan, do you know who you are pointing at?" Ethan chuckled. After all, he knew that my family was ordinary, my parents were retired teachers, and I had worked my way up step by myself. The relatives and friends who came today were mostly my parents' colleagues and my classmates. And this person with disabled legs sitting in a wheelchair was at my family's guest table. Subconsciously, he thought it was just a disabled person from a poor family, and his eyes were full of disdain. "Who else could it be? Your family's poor relative, right? But he matches Lara well, they both look poor." After Ethan said this translated text. When I saw Ethan pointing at him, I was nervous. And after this person laughed, he looked at me, making me even more nervous. "Lara, do you think we are suitable?" His voice was still clear, and those light brown eyes looked at a dog affectionately, let alone at me. I didn't speak, clenching my hands tightly. After all, I didn't know what the consequences would be for offending a top tycoon in the capital. But he persistently asked, "Suitable or not?" When Ethan heard him ask me that, he couldn't help but laugh, whispering to Maya behind my back, "Oh no, this disabled person really has his eyes on her, it's so funny." Hearing this, I felt that my 3 years of dedication were even more unworthy. Which I was blind to fall for a bastard like Ethan and even give up studying abroad for him? After he was dumped by Maya, I accompanied him late at night to wander and drink in the city. All of this was so unworthy. Only fortunate that I saw clearly before getting the certificate. I met that person's gaze and found that there was seriousness in his eyes, so I blurted out, "Suitable, very suitable." At this moment, my mother widened her eyes. Who doesn't know that Gabriel, the top tycoon in the capital, is a Buddhist? Since the car accident, he has been fasting and chanting Buddhist scriptures. When I was young, because my mother was outstanding in teaching, she was selected by the school leaders to tutor Gabriel, who was paralyzed at home after the car accident. I went with her. At that time, Gabriel was not smiling. I always felt that this young master of the Gu family disliked me. Every time I went to the Gu family, he would hide far away. My father said it was because he was afraid of being infected by my stupid genes. So, although my mother became his mentor through 10 years of teaching, my relationship with him was always indifferent. When writing the invitation for this wedding, I thought about it for a long time. But thinking that the Fu family needed support, I finally wrote down Gabriel's name. But when I called to inform him, I could tell he was not willing to come and was very unhappy. Yet he came today, which only shows that he does respect my mother as his teacher. And now, both my mother and I are worried that this decisive Gabriel in the capital might drive both my family and the Fu family out of the capital in one breath. However, to everyone's surprise, he suddenly stood up from the wheelchair. "Will you marry me?" He walked up to me and asked in a low voice. "Yes, yes." After I stammered my answer, he held my hand and walked past Ethan openly. At that moment, I heard my heartbeat accelerating. But his hand was warm and strong. Ethan's mother couldn't help but laugh mockingly. "What a medical miracle. The disability is cured. Then, Auntie Lara wishes you and your disabled boyfriend a happy marriage. Don't let him run away when you go out, you have to hold on to him," she said, laughing loudly. Several relatives of the Fu family also laughed. Gabriel looked at Ethan's mother. "The Fu family, right?" Ethan's mother held her head high. "Yes. It's the famous Fu family in the capital. Except for the Gu family, no one can compare with us." "What? Are you scared?" Ask clearly to avoid hurting the innocent. "Who do you think you are?" "Just a dead disabled person picking up worn shoes, pretending what?" When he was previously called a dead disabled person, there was no ripple in his eyes. But when he heard me being scolded, I clearly felt his anger. But I have to admire his emotional management, it has been so good since childhood. He just gave a look to the plainclothes bodyguard who had been following him, and then pulled me to walk out. He didn't forget to tell my mother, "Teacher, Lara and I will go to get the certificate first, and we'll have dinner together later." My mother seemed not to have reacted yet, mumbling and just watched us walk out. Outside, I let go of the tightly held hand. Looking at Gabriel, I said, "Thank you for helping me out." But Gabriel still held my hand. "Did you bring all the documents?" I nodded because I had originally told Ethan that we would go directly to handle the procedures in the wedding dress, so I brought all my documents. They were in the compartment inside the wedding dress. He looked at my wedding dress and shook his head. "Can the Fu family only afford such a cheap wedding dress?" I smiled. "It's not that they can only afford it, it's that they are only willing to buy this price range for me. There's still time now, let's go." I blindly followed Gabriel into the car and first went to a custom wedding dress shop. When I was going to marry Ethan, people in the circle also recommended this shop. Top designers, and they have a unique wedding dress concept. Each style is only used by one customer. After the customer purchases it, this style will never be produced again. So, it has unique exclusivity. I told Ethan several times, but he acted as if he didn't hear. Now, being pulled in by Gabriel, it even felt like an illusion. "Mr. Gabriel, are you here to pick up the previously customized wedding dress?" Gabriel nodded. Not long after, the clerk brought out an extremely gorgeous wedding dress for me. "Me? Mine?" I pointed at myself, and the clerk smiled and said, "Yes, Mr. Gabriel ordered it before his surgery 2 years ago, saying it was convenient for snatching the wedding." "Ah?" I was confused. 2 years ago, at that time, I had just got together with Ethan, and Gabriel was said to have gone abroad. My mother said he went to develop overseas business and stayed for a full year, returning just before my wedding. Thinking of this, the white strings at the back of the wedding dress had been tightly tied, and this fishtail almost body-hugging wedding dress actually fit my figure perfectly. After the curtain was opened, Gabriel looked up at me, completely different from Ethan at that time. There was no impatience, but full of appreciation in his eyes. He smiled and put his arm around my waist. Let's go. To get the certificate. Are you serious? Of course I'm serious. The photography team is all arranged. The driver will be here soon, and we'll go directly to the nearest civil affairs bureau. He looked at the time, holding my hand with one hand, and I surprisingly had no intention of objecting and followed him into the car. Taking photos, getting the certificate, distributing wedding candies to everyone, all done in one go, and I didn't even realize that I had married him just like that. As a result, when having dinner with my parents in the evening, the news that Gabriel, the top tycoon in the capital, was married directly topped the hot search. My mother was halfway through dinner when the relatives and friends of the Fu family who mocked her at the wedding today sent their blessings one after another. As soon as she answered, the other party directly said, "Oh, please don't mind what happened at the wedding today, we were all deceived by the Fu family. Actually, that bastard Ethan doesn't deserve our Lara. Lara and Gabriel are really a perfect match." There were also a few who had a big fight with my mother. After sending red envelopes and seeing that my mother didn't accept them, they started calling me. Even my father's phone was rung by someone. The three of us looked at each other in confusion. I am socially anxious and always have my phone on silent, and even if I see it, I won't answer. It wasn't until I opened my phone and saw the hot search saying, "Gabriel, the top tycoon in the capital, successfully snatched the wedding, fulfilling his years of secret love dream, and married the beauty." Gabriel mentioned in the news 2 years ago that he liked someone impossible, and now it has become possible. On the news, there were several sets of photos taken with Gabriel when getting the certificate today. I have to say, the photographer he hired was indeed professional. He really made us look like a perfect match. Especially his eyes, looking at me affectionately, not at all like the person who used to anxiously hit the wall when I got a question wrong as a child. Along with this news, the news that I was left at the wedding today and Ethan got the certificate with his first love also made the hot search. However, this news was suppressed not long after it came up. Instead, it was replaced by the past stories of Ethan and his first love. The news that Maya was previously a mistress, thinking she could take the position, dumped Ethan to marry a big boss abroad, but was beaten by the original wife to the point of miscarriage, was prominently ranked in the top 10 of the list. Secondly, 2 companies under Ethan's name were divested. And the news that the Gu family announced they would never cooperate with the Fu family in their lifetime topped the list. Did you two really get the certificate? My mother, who had come to her senses, widened her eyes and looked at me, who was silent with my head down. Gabriel nodded. Then he placed our marriage certificate in front of my parents. At the same time, there was a thick stack of asset certificates and Gabriel's will, all placed on the table. It seemed that he had prepared these things long ago. Here is the declaration of all my properties. From the moment I got the certificate with Lara, I have asked my lawyer to add her name one by one. Secondly, these are 2 properties I have added for you 2 elders, both very close to Lara's workplace. This is my physical examination report. Because I had a car accident and had nerve damage for a long time and couldn't stand, but I have undergone systematic treatment abroad and am now completely recovered. These are the assets of my parents and my grandparents. From the moment Lara entered the door, they have transferred the properties to Lara's account. My parents and I were stunned in place, but he looked at me calmly. Marrying you, I have planned for 3 years. I was originally prepared to snatch you directly today, but I didn't expect. 3 years? I looked at him in disbelief. He hugged me tightly. Maybe today was your impulsive decision, but I won't let you regret it in the future. He hugged me comfortably, and I gradually responded to him. At this moment, someone rushed in. Lara. Where is Lara? When Ethan rushed in, I was hugging Gabriel, and he looked incredulous. Pointing at me, he said, "You really married him?" I don't know what right he has to question me at this time. Wasn't he the one who first announced his marriage to Maya? I nodded and waved my marriage certificate with Gabriel in front of him. He grabbed my hand and snatched the marriage certificate. He opened it to verify if what I said was true. Seeing the photo and the steel seal on it, he roared. "I didn't agree to you marrying someone else. Lara, how dare you marry him? He used to be disabled, paralyzed from the waist down. Even if he has money, so what? Marrying a paralyzed person, you won't be happy for the rest of your life. He's just a facade now, who knows when he might become paralyzed again." As he said this, he pulled my hand and randomly stuffed the ring he had previously taken from my hand onto my ring finger. "I didn't say I don't want you, it's just that Maya has depression. When she gets better, we'll have the wedding again." At this time, my father directly drove him away and pointed at his nose, saying, "Even if my daughter marries anyone, she will never marry you again, Ethan. We may not have as much money as your family, but we have backbone." My mother also pushed him away and stood in front of Gabriel. "This is my son-in-law. The son-in-law I've watched grow up, handsomer than you, richer than you, better than you in every way. Why would we go back to you, this inferior product?" Gabriel secretly smiled at my mother's praise. Then he hugged me tightly and kissed me in front of Ethan. At first, he supported himself with his hands strenuously, perhaps thinking I would resist or not respond, so the kiss was a bit sluggish and calm. When I started to put my arms around his neck, his hands trembled a bit. But it became increasingly sweet. Ethan was finally driven away by the bodyguards. There was still unwillingness in his eyes. I know he thought that I, this follower, couldn't possibly turn around and marry someone else, so he was waiting for me to go back and beg him, just like before. But before was before. After that day, I submitted my resignation to the HR of the Foo Group. I never went to work at the Foo Group again and directly went abroad with Gabriel to see his grandparents and have our honeymoon. For a full 2 months, my relationship with Gabriel warmed up rapidly. It was also then that I learned that he had a good impression of me since the first time I went to his house. When I was young, the reason he got angry when I couldn't solve a problem was that he originally wanted to go to the same university as me, but seeing how difficult it was for me to study, he knew there was no hope. His nerve surgery was a high-risk operation, so before he left, he didn't confess to me but went to customize a wedding dress. He said that at that time, he thought that if the surgery was successful, even if I married someone else, he would try to snatch the wedding. If I wasn't willing to go with him, he would give me the wedding dress. Seeing me standing there waiting for an hour, he felt heartbroken. He had already made up his mind that even if Ethan came back and I was still willing to marry Ethan, he would still snatch me away. So, during that hour, he arranged everything for the future. Just as he finished arranging, Ethan also came. He rightfully took me away. On the day we returned to the country, I found out I was pregnant, but I didn't tell Gabriel, wanting to give him a surprise. As soon as the plane landed, I turned on my domestic mobile phone and found densely packed messages from Ethan. And also from Ethan's mother. "Where are you? I really miss you. Can you come to see me? Room number 1202, I'll be waiting for you. I believe you will come. Lara, how can you be so heartless? You weren't like this before. Are you still angry with me? Lara, I'm giving you one last chance. If you don't cherish it, Ethan, really won't want you anymore." I looked for a while and lost interest, directly blocking and deleting him in one go. And his mother's messages. At first, she crazily scolded me, saying I was materialistic, climbing up the high branch to harm the Fu family. Later, I don't know what happened, she started apologizing to me, apologizing crazily. Looking at the messages she sent, I couldn't even understand. Just as I was about to block her, she sent me another message. "Lara, Ethan is dying. Can you come to see him?" She sent a photo of Ethan lying on the hospital bed, barely alive, with Maya sitting next to him. He has been missing you very much. Auntie is begging you, just come to see him for the last time, and there will be no more entanglements in the future. I looked at Gabriel standing next to me and then replied to Ethan's mother with one word, okay. That night, after accompanying Gabriel to the banquet, I drove to that hospital. When I arrived at the ward door, Maya happened to come out from inside. Her face was bruised and swollen, looking particularly frightening. The moment she saw me, she forced a smile and said, "He's waiting for you inside, hurry in." Her hands were also bruised, holding a kettle and hurriedly walking towards the water room. When I pushed open the door, there was a smell inside, indistinguishable whether it was a bad smell or the smell of medicine. Ethan's mother was resting by the hospital bed. When she saw me coming, she immediately held my hand. "I knew you couldn't bear to part with Ethan, Lara. It was Auntie's fault at that time. Auntie thought Maya was a good child and we knew her since childhood, so I made the decision to let Ethan marry Maya." She wiped her tears while speaking, looking truly regretful. One hand, without the support of high-end skincare products and medical beauty, looked extremely aged. There were no gold or silver jewelry on her wrist, just a red string. She looked at me haggardly. "Auntie knows that you have a good relationship with that person from the Gu family. Can you plead with him to let our Fu family go? Now the Fu family is being targeted by people in the capital, and the business can't go on. After all, you have worked at the Fu group for so long, you must have some feelings, right?" As she was speaking, Ethan woke up. He saw me and signaled his mother with his eyes. Ethan's mother quickly left and closed the door directly. Ethan looked at me, "It's ridiculous. Without you, no one makes porridge for me at night, no one reminds me to drink less, and suddenly my body is ruined, becoming like this." He sighed and mocked himself. I looked at my phone and didn't pay attention. "Lara, can you sit a little closer? I just want to talk to you, absolutely no other meaning." His pale face pleaded, making me feel a bit pity, so I sat a few inches closer to him. As a result, he suddenly used brute force to hold my waist tightly in his arms. He tried to kiss me but was slapped away by me. But he didn't give up. He directly grabbed my hand and pressed me against the wall. "I want to see if, after I have you here, that Gabriel who claims to love you to the bone will still want you. Lara, with our long-term relationship, how can you not save me? Rest assured, as long as you divorce Gabriel, I won't despise you." As he said this, he tried to force me. I struggled hard to break free. But his hand gripped my wrist tightly, saying to me, "When you heard I was sick, you came immediately. I heard you even left Gabriel at the banquet to come specifically to find me. Why don't you dare to admit that you still love me?" He whispered in my ear, "Maya was beaten by a bad woman before and had a miscarriage, she can't have children anymore. Lara, have a child with me. As long as you give birth to a boy, I'll immediately divorce Maya and marry you. Isn't he so thick-skinned?" I thought to myself as my phone rang. I reached out to get it. Ethan directly knocked my phone down, seeing that the caller ID said husband. He directly smashed the phone hard on the ground. "Why did you note Gabriel as husband? Your husband can only be me." He almost madly pulled my hair, repeatedly emphasizing that only he could be my husband. "Gabriel is so good to you, and you still come to see me, which shows you're not a good thing either. In that case, you might as well be with me." As he said this and tried hard to tear off my clothes, Gabriel pushed open the door. At this time Ethan was still arrogant. He put his arm around my waist. "Gabriel, don't think too much, we are just the kind of relationship you think." He looked at Gabriel proudly and said to him, "Lara is my woman. Even if she went with you for 2 months, how can that offset the 2 years we were together? So she still couldn't help but come to see me. You might as well give up and let Lara come back to our Fu group to be my secretary." As he said this, Gabriel walked over and kicked him away. "Wife, the people from the funeral home you wanted have arrived." I helplessly glanced at Ethan. I originally thought he was dying, so I was helping to send him off for the last time. So when I saw the message, I directly notified Gabriel and asked him to help contact them. I even booked the urn and the funeral service package. But when I came here, I found he was still quite energetic. What a waste of expectation. At this moment, the people from the funeral service came in. Gabriel. We're here to dress the deceased in burial clothes. Where is the deceased? Gabriel pointed to Ethan over there. That person looked and said in surprise, how is he still alive? Is it the last radiance before death? I smiled and said, yes, the last radiance before death. Hurry and dress him. Then Gabriel signaled to the strong bodyguards beside him to help. In the end, they forcibly dressed Ethan in burial clothes and even stuffed his nostrils. Before leaving, the bodyguard gave him a chop to knock him out. Ethan's mother heard the noise and rushed over. Seeing her son wearing burial clothes, she fainted immediately. What not to pretend, but to pretend to be dead, be careful of retribution in the future. I said, pointing at Maya who had arrived. Maya lowered her head without speaking but glanced at Gabriel. She staggered and was about to lean over, but Gabriel pushed her away. Don't touch me, I find it dirty. After Maya was pushed away, Gabriel and I left holding hands. After this vacation, I happened to go to the food group to handle the final resignation procedures and do the final handover. After all, this is my job. A few days later, when I arrived at the company, several veterans were already packing up to leave. HR was still sending resumes to other companies. The moment HR saw me, they said excitedly, Sister Lara, you're back? I nodded. I'm back to handle the resignation procedures and hand over the work. HR sighed and said directly, I can't handle your work for you. All the procedures have been suppressed by Ethan. You need to go to Ethan yourself for the handover. HR took me to knock on Ethan's office door. As soon as it was pushed open, I saw Ethan looking at the table full of documents with a worried expression. After seeing me come in, the unpleasantness that happened at the hospital last time made him look a bit embarrassed. This time, he was obviously restrained. He said to me, Lara, you are now part of the Gu family. Can you help me say a word? If the food group continues to be targeted, it will really be finished. Do you remember that this is what we two worked hard to build? Can you bear it? I nodded. What's there not to bear? Back then, I devoted myself to the company, and after being with him, I even voluntarily reduced many of my benefits just to save the food group, which was already in crisis. After 2 years, the food group returned to its original state. The wedding that Ethan originally promised me was destroyed by his own hands. Now, asking me to think about the past, I'm not that cheap. I'm here to handle the resignation procedures. As for what the food group will become, it's no longer within my concern. I don't agree to your resignation. Back then, you accompanied me out of the trough. This time, help me again, just this once, okay? He tried to hold my hand. I stepped back and said directly, if you don't handle it, I'll sue. Anyway, I have money and time now, and I have plenty of time to waste with you. I turned to leave. He hugged me tightly from behind. I know you are with Gabriel to anger me. I've thought it through. As long as you divorce him, I'll divorce Maya, and we'll get married immediately. I'll give you a more luxurious wedding dress, and ring. I slowly raised my hand, and the huge South African pink diamond on it was truly dazzling. He stared at it for a long time. Because people in the business world know that this diamond was auctioned for 100 million. But he didn't expect that Gabriel auctioned it for 100 million and gave it to me. But he hasn't given you a wedding yet, which means the elders of the Gu family don't recognize you yet, and your life will be very difficult. I laughed. If you didn't say it, I almost forgot. This is the invitation to my wedding with Gabriel. Remember to come. I originally didn't plan to give him this invitation. But since he asked like that, I must give it to him. Lara, these are all illusions. What's real in front of you is our 2 years together. Can you deny that you didn't love me at that time? Since you loved me, how could you stop loving me in such a short time? I looked into his eyes and patted his face. If you can, why can't I? Do I have to mourn for you, this scumbag? I'm not an idiot. He was unwilling to let me go. My feelings with Maya have faded. As long as you are willing to be with me, I can divorce immediately. I shook my head. It's too late, the child is already a month-old Gabriel's. I smiled and flashed the examination report in front of him. He actually said directly, abort it. We'll have more in the future. Abort this child, I won't mind. I went up and kicked him, picked up the golf club next to me, and gave him a beating. Then I wiped my hands and left directly. He was beaten and hugged himself on the ground, crying in pain. Before I was obviously pregnant, Gabriel prepared a very grand wedding for me. Although there was that incident at the last wedding, I still had my own expectations for the wedding. This time, I secretly chose the wedding dress myself without telling Gabriel, and a suit as well. In my favorite castle, I invited my parents and a few good friends, his parents and grandparents, and a few friends, and that was it. When I walked out in the wedding dress, I heard my mother's crying. At that moment, I turned my head and saw my parents sitting below. My mother had red eyes and kept telling me to walk forward. My father covered his eyes and didn't dare to look anymore. I gently tapped Gabriel's back, who was facing away from me. He slowly turned to me, and the moment he saw me, his tears welled up. He hugged me tightly in his arms. Then we reveled with friends, and friends also carefully prepared various gifts for us. Everything went smoothly. But I saw Ethan standing at the entrance. He was holding the admission ticket I gave him but only dared to watch my happiness from a distance. I had told him about this wedding before. I said I only wanted the closest people to attend my wedding, not too commercial. But at that time, he directly arranged an extremely commercialized wedding behind my back, with reporters and sponsors. Now, seeing him looking somewhat weathered, but it has nothing to do with me anymore. After the wedding, I received the resignation notice from the Fu group. Then I started interning at the Gu family, starting from the bottom, and when the due date came, I directly took leave at home. Gabriel has always been very good to me. At the moment the child was born, he almost knelt down at the hospital door. When I was pushed out, I saw him holding a bunch of dolls standing in front of me. He said to me, whether I am the child's mother or not, I will always be his little princess. In this life, and the next,